Stephen, the last number of weeks, months with Tottenham, there have been a lot of off-field distractions. We will see that the playing surface at Wembley shortly, it is better than it was last week, but it's still not in good shape. They've had the frustrations about not moving into the stadium. They've also had these football leaks, revelations coming over the weekend that Tottenham are not going to be involved in these plans for a proposed European Super League. What's your feeling as to where Tottenham is at the minute? Financially very well run. OK, the stadium is they're spending an awful lot of money on it. But are they at a bit of a crossroads? Do they stick? They need to, or do they need to push on now and get into that top 4 or 5, start challenging for the Champions League?
I think for Tottenham, they've always done it the right way. They've always been steady when it comes to bringing players in, not gone crazy overspending. So they've set themselves up. The training facilities are fantastic. They've got an amazing stadium, which is going to hopefully be open soon enough. So for them to move on, maybe they have to almost roll the dice a little bit more than they have done in the past. Possibly try and bring in another superstar. You know, they have Harry Kane, and keeping him in the summer was probably one of the best pieces of business, because to have a player that was Golden Boot winner in the World Cup, you know, a fantastic asset. But maybe they need to just go for a little bit more than they have done and just push the boat out a little bit, which is not normal to what Tottenham do, but maybe they need to do that if they want to start winning those medals, which they so badly covet. And
Richie, when I make the point about them pushing on to the top 4 or 5, of course, that's firmly where they've been for the last number of seasons in the Premier League. But there are 5 clubs involved in the discussions for this proposed European Super League, and Tottenham are not there. And that's my point, you know.
Yeah.
And what is that based on? Why are they not there?
I think that's a huge development, because in the last few weeks we're hearing a lot of conversations around what Tottenham should do, like the conversation we're having. Should they spend a little bit more to close the gap between them and Man City, or overcome them? We're now learning that if all those documents are true and that those are the plans, it doesn't matter if they spend 100 or 200 million. It doesn't matter if they go from 3rd or 4th in the Premier League up to 1st. They're not at the top table. They're not going to be included in those plans. Those plans are put together by clubs based on political power, commercial strength, the history. Non-sporting factors are driving all of those things, and there's no reason for us to believe that Tottenham can break into that. So the arguments that they should spend money to get into it, to get into what? They're not invited into that. They're not going to be into it. So if those plans are credible, and that's a scenario that is going to unfold in 3 years in European football, doesn't matter what Daniel Levy does. It doesn't matter what players he keeps or signs. They're not going to be involved. It's
something we're going to come back to. I know the figures about net transfer spend. I think 29 million was the figure that was mentioned, and we will come back to this later. Their wage bill over the last couple of seasons, it's a fraction of the Chelsea's and Manchester United. So, you know, we'll just see and maybe talk about what they need to do next, or what they are going to do next. But the stadium will come online. That'll bring a whole new revenue stream for them, but they are not involved in the discussions for this proposed European Super League. There are 5 English teams in there already. New Champions League deal, which this is year 1 of 3, features, you know, a lot more money for the clubs, but it is all about mega cash, isn't it? This talk, and it is only talks. We've had, you know, the details of these meetings with the big clubs. We've had details of that through this football leaks documents in Der Spiegel in Germany.
Like, but it makes a huge amount of sense commercially for clubs to do this. For all of you, they make tens of millions every year in the Champions League. They'll be able to change that revenue to being hundreds of millions. Let's assume all the meetings have taken place and all the figures and the documents are true. This is the logical, inevitable next step the football was going to go to. Like, if you think back to all the arguments that were made for the formation of the Premier League in '92, it's about most of the money to a small amount of clubs at the top of the English game. And it made it way more attractive, way more higher quality to watch, way more revenue in terms of media and sponsorship, the whole lot. Players came from all over the world to play in it. The Champions League is the same thing. Consolidate huge amount of money in Europe to the top amount of teams. And now you've found that within that Champions League, there's a group of teams every year. They're the same teams in the latter stages of the tournament. They're dominating domestically. They're commercial, like, juggernauts. So I'd be surprised if it doesn't happen. When you see it all, that it makes sense to everyone. I don't know what power there is. I'm not sure on the legalities of it all. I don't know what power that UEFA have, or domestic leagues and all that stuff, but you would assume if there are hurdles that can't be cleared, this would have been dropped before now.
We've a question, and thank you for the question, a gentleman or lady called Soccer Fan, and this question goes along the lines of, do you think if Spurs spent a lot more money, they could win the Premier League or the Champions League? What do you think of that, Stephen? Your old team.
How much is a lot more?
Yeah, a lot more.
Yeah, I know. Well, let's say 100 million in the January window.
Well, one player could cost you 100 million.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So if you're going Man City spending or Chelsea spending, when Chelsea first came onto the scene, they effectively bought titles by the players they were able to, attract to the club. So technically, it could be done. Do they have the right manager in place there? Probably. He would seem to could scout a player that could improve them. Would they have the finances? I don't know. With the way the things are at the moment, would they ever, Tottenham, throw themselves at something like that on going the past? I don't think they would. But yeah, I think technically they could definitely buy themselves a title. Do you just look at the teams that have done it?
I think, we know from watching football, titles and trophies can be bought.
Yeah.
You just outspend all your opponents and you're in a stronger position. But I don't know how much money you would have to give Pochettino now. If you were to give him the squad he has now and a checkbook, knowing the price of the top players out there, knowing the way the market is and the wage bill and all that stuff, 100 million, 200 million, it's not going to bridge the gap between them and Man City.
Well, look at Fulham. How much is Fulham spending in the summer? And they are going...
100 mil, wasn't it?
There you go. Going to be relegated.
You pick an amount of money, 150 million, that might buy you Mbappe.
Yeah.
Would Mbappe on his own in that Tottenham squad bring the level of consistency and performance and all the wins they would need to bridge the gap between them and Man City? In my view, no. So 150 million isn't enough.
It's not enough, yeah.
If you double that, in what areas would you strengthen and who would you bring in? To win the Champions League, you have to bridge the gap between where Tottenham are now, which is third in their group at the moment, to who? Barcelona, Bayern, Real. Who are the top clubs? So yes is the answer with a lot of money, but the amount of money you're talking about, it's too unrealistic.
And the current market is astronomical, isn't it?
And they do have the right manager as well. He's a much sought after manager. He's signed up to a new long-term contract. There's an awful lot of clubs who would love to get their hands on him to manage their team.
And it seems like there'll be a lot of players that would like to play under him as well. He seems like a manager you'd want to play for. He seems to get the best out of all those players he has there. So they're looking extremely, on paper they look like a lovely team to go for this. Like, manager, check. Superstar in Harry Kane, goal scorer, check. Stadium on its way, almost check. They've got a lot of things going for them. There's something missing. That's
the biggest thing, which is going to become a factor now. If the Super League talks are credible, and if there's progress being made, and if the clubs actually sign off on what we think is going to be the case, which in Tottenham's case means they're not involved, then what's going to happen is, in the next year or two, they won't be able to attract the biggest players on long-term contracts, because the biggest players won't want to sign a long-term contract with a club that can't be in the top league in Europe. Pochettino, will he want to stay there? He's got personal ambition himself, so he's going to know he's now managing a club that doesn't matter how much they're going to give him to spend, which they don't have much because they're buying a new stadium, but even if he had loads, the best players won't arrive, because they're not going to be in the competition that all the best players in the world are going to be in.
Won't be competing.
So it's a huge game changer for Tottenham if the details, as we've led them to believe they are
correct. And we know that there are 5 English clubs in there. Like how, you can't go somewhere if you're not invited. But how do Tottenham get themselves to that top table if this thing does come to fruition?
I don't think they can.
I don't think they can, because they're not.
How do you overcome? How do you get past Liverpool?
Yeah.
How do you get, Man United could finish 8th in the Premier League?
It's still commercially the biggest.
5 years in a row, and Tottenham finished 3 or 4 places above them. Nobody in the Super League talks will see Tottenham as a better option than Man U, because it's not about just performances on the pitch.
It's about their commercial viability as basically as a brand. It's their branding, isn't it? And Tottenham are not as big as brand as those top 5, which is the issue.
And I don't think there's anything they can do in the next 5 years to jump above City or Chelsea, United or Liverpool to be.
If they won the Premiership 5 years in a row, they'd have an opportunity. They might, but that's that's asking a lot, and
it is asking a lot.
So
well, look, it is asking.